There it is. Sometimes she takes a minute. Okay, great. And then the next thing I want to do before we get into content is these are my group norms guidelines. This is what I feel like really creates a safe space during the meeting. The first is no judgment. We practice unconditional respect, which means that we don't diagnose and we don't label. So, for example, I have a coaching practice, but I will never tell someone, oh, I think this is why you're feeling this way, or you might have this particular disorder or something. I don't do that because I believe that that steps on people's autonomy. Um, so that's the first guideline. And then the second is we use I language and we speak from our own experience. We don't give advice. Same thing in my coaching practice. I really try to avoid telling people what I think they should do because I think that everybody has the best answer inside of themselves. One of the human systems, healthy systems principles is that the person closest to the problem should be the one to solve the problem. And so if someone is having a challenge, then I believe they are the best person to solve it. And that whatever I tell them to do is not going to be the right answer because I'm not them.
Mhm.
And then the third is what is said here stays here, what is learned here leaves here. So we may share personal stories with each other as part of, a learning experience, and we agree to keep those stories inside of the session, but we can take whatever we learn from the stories and from the material and share them with whomever we like. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah, I went through the deck. I think most of it.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. All right, so let's do introduction. So I know your name. I know where you're from, Pakistan, and I'm very excited about that because you were the first person that I've met with or done anything with or had attempt to purchase anything from me from that country. So I was like very excited to hear from you. Um, why you're interested in the workshop and an emotion check-in. So I would love to just hear a couple of emotions that you have if you feel comfortable sharing those.
Sure. There was a worksheet in your document which I did fill up.
Uh-huh.
If you like, I can pull that up and we can talk about that because that had emotion and then need and then something to do
Yeah.
with that need.
So we're going, so there's yes, and I would love to say that for a little bit later.
Okay.
So for the emotion check-in, it's a little bit different. It's just whatever emotions you are feeling right now in the moment. And it could have to do with our conversation, what's going on right now, or it could just be whatever you're bringing to the table from how your day has been going.
Sure. I mean, I think generally speaking, so I'm an engineer and I am very bad with recognizing emotions.
Okay.
And I'd say I'm very curious right now, hopeful that this session will give me some answers to questions which I have lingering and
Mm-hmm.
mean things that are bothering me, I'd say, like in terms of curious interest, the questions that don't have answers bother you. So that I think is a predominant feeling. Um, yeah, I think broadly speaking, that's it. I had a headache a couple of hours ago, so that's probably uh, contributing to some kind of an emotion. I'm not sure what, probably just feeling a little miserable from that. Generally, all right. Um, so let me tell you more about me.
Yes, please.
Uh, so my name is Umar. We go by the last name. Generally, if the first name is Muhammad, you go by the last name. If you called out Muhammad in a room full of Pakistanis, like half the room would turn
Ah, okay, good to know. Thank you.
everybody's
I
name.
am not up on Pakistani culture, so you'll have to teach me.
It's also in the Middle East. Generally, everybody's named Muhammad something, and then if you call out Muhammad, like everybody's gonna. So
Okay.
I run an IT company. We do a lot of outsourcing from the US. That has been my career. It's the last 25 years. I have worked in the US, all over the world, really, in Europe. Uh, but in the US, last it's like 20 some years, I've been working in the US for US customers. Um, so I run an IT company, and we have like 130 people on staff,
Hmm. Hmm.
which do all sorts of things. And my job is predominantly managing people. Um, so in the early days of my career, when I was dealing with computers all day long, it's kind of easier. They don't have emotions and they don't have needs, and you tell them what to do and they do it. But as you grow and need to start now managing people, um, they're a lot more difficult to understand and inspire and motivate and all that. So that challenge kind of led me to structuring my thought a little bit, trying to read up on the academics of it, which kind of led me to your website. And that's kind of what brings me here, is trying to understand not just my own needs, but also how to assess the needs of a lot of my staff to be able to motivate them and incentivize them, etc. That's my primary interest here. And I'll, so I looked at your chart initially. That's where this started off. Google led me to your website. I looked at your chart. Chart looked interesting. I try to reconcile that with all the other sort of models out there for needs analysis. Um, and I thought is a pretty good aggregation of all of that, which I later realized from one of your videos. This is kind of the approach you've taken. Um and I've heard similar things. Like this is a topic of interest for me. It has been for years, and so I've read quite a number of books on the subject, and they give different models. Like there's this like CIA model that we were following: control, identity, and arousal. There's obviously Maslow, and this looked like a good aggregation, simple enough to use and comprehensive enough to be thorough. I, anyways, let me not dive right into what I think. There you probably have some things on your agenda, and then we can. I have a lot of questions on that, which I'd love to talk to you about when we get into that.
Okay, wonderful. Um, Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I'm so excited to talk to you now, knowing the context of why you're interested. And I think that normally I suggest that people do the emotion wheel mini cert first. However, I think that you picked the exact right one given your primary interest, which sounds like it's both personal interest for your own growth, but also the best way to, you talked about incentivizing your employees. So I think this is a great workshop for you to start with. And then if you're interested in more emotions, you might want to do the emotion mini cert one as well. But I think this is a good place to start. Uh, so I am from Maryland, which is it seems like everybody but people in the US have a much better grasp of world geography, but it's on the East Coast of the United States,
Yeah,
just in case you don't know. And you've done work in the US, so you probably know that.
yeah, I lived in
I
Maryland for a while. Yeah.
You lived in where?
So I was very, very young. Like my dad was doing his PhD in the University of Maryland. So we lived there when he was
Oh, no kidding.
3 years old or something. I don't remember.
Get out. Oh my God, that's so cool. Okay, great. All right. So you do have some familiarity. All right. Um, I teach this workshop because, and I will get into this in a little bit, but I had very real practical experience with uh, trying to work with people around identifying their needs and realizing that it's really, really hard to do that. We are not taught how to be aware enough to identify our needs and then also how to express them in a way that is inviting and not directive to other people. So I created the needs wheel as has a very similar function as an emotion wheel. I created it so that it could help people figure out what they need because it's so much easier to pick from a list than it is to just to come up with it on your own. So it's a self-awareness tool. And I'll talk a little more about that as we get into the workshop. And then my emotions today, I usually feel a mix of uncomfortable and comfortable. I just, things are always going on and happening that are challenging. So today, I'll start with uncomfortable emotions. Today, I'm feeling in the sad area, I feel sorrowful. And in the afraid area, I feel um, terrified. And then in the angry area, I feel let down, I think. And then for comfortable emotion, this is just what I'm bringing today. This has nothing to do with our conversation or the session. But I will tell you the emotions I'm feeling specifically about the session. So comfortable emotions, I'm feeling a ton of relief. I feel very grateful. I feel hope. I feel very loving. And then about our session today, just based on our conversation so far, I feel inspired and excited and curious. So that's my emotion check-in. And let's go ahead and jump into the content. So today we're going to talk about the origin of the HS needs wheel, so how it came to be. We're going to talk about two theories of human needs that I think are very, very good and that are, I think, provide a really good context for why the wheel works and how we can use it. We're also going to talk about, if we have time, how I developed the needs wheels. And if not, I have a video on that, and unless you've already seen it, and it sounds like you have watched a few.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So we may skip that just for time reasons, especially if you have a lot of questions, which is great.
I do. Yeah.
And then we'll talk about the benefits of using the needs wheel. We'll get into the worksheet a little bit. And then I'll make suggestions for how you might want to use them in with yourself and other people. And I'll try to focus on the workplace since it sounds like you're particularly interested in that.
Yep.
Okay, so I started noticing that people really had a hard time identifying their needs, myself included. A lot of this is a purely selfish endeavor because this is the product of my personal journey to become more self-aware and more mindful in general. And there is a tool I have called Turning Emotion into Action, which is a core human systems tool that I use a lot. I do a lot of workshops around it. People really seem to love it. And the first step is for people to identify their emotions. And the second step is to identify the need that's highlighted by the emotion. And then the third step is to come up with like a principle that will help shift their perspective. And then the fourth step is to come up with some kind of action step. So what I noticed is that people had no problem identifying their emotions using the emotion wheel, but I hadn't yet developed the needs wheel. But when I asked them to talk about the need that went with the emotion, so I believe that there is an unmet need behind every uncomfortable emotion and a met need behind every comfortable emotion. So when I would ask them to identify the need behind, say, an uncomfortable emotion, they would they would attach the need to a specific person, place, or thing. They would tell a story. So they would say, I need her to be on time. I need him to do his work. I need them to communicate more. And here's the problem with pinning our needs to a specific person, place, or thing. It creates an external locus of control. So, Omar, are you familiar with the idea of internal versus external locus of control?
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured you would be. So, it creates this external locus of control, and we give our power away to somebody else, and what our happiness and joy rests on what they do, which we don't want that. The other thing it does, when we pin our need to somebody, we are limiting our options. We can only be happy if the person does exactly what we want and exactly the way we want it to be done. And I don't know about your experience, but in my experience, that rarely happens. So, um, so part of my journey has been learning how to unpin my needs, to separate my needs from specific people, places, or things. Um, so why is it hard to identify our needs? This is what I think based on my research and personal experience. I think a core issue is low self-worth. And just to be clear, self-worth is different than self-esteem. So in the research, scientific research, self-esteem has to do with my performance in the world. So, and it invites comparison. So my self-esteem can go up and down depending on how I perform in comparison to other people. So what we want to do is separate our sense of self-esteem, which is about performance and comparison, from our sense of self-worth. I want my self-worth to be the same all the time, regardless of what kind of feedback I get from the world or particular people. So when I have low self-worth, when my self-worth is pinned to my performance in the world and comparing myself to other people, it's going to be really hard for me to figure out what I need, and to express it. If the other the other reason we have trouble identifying our needs is because if we can't identify our emotions, then it's going to be hard for us to identify our needs. So in the research, according to self-determination theory, which we'll talk about in a little bit, when I can identify my emotions using emotion words and emotion vocabulary, it's much easier for me to also then identify my needs. It's like they're inextricably linked. So getting better at identifying my emotions means that I will get better at identifying my needs. The other reason I think is that we tend to have very goal-driven behavior that is reinforced by societal norms. So when I have a goal in mind or expectations, that's me attaching a need that I have to a specific person, place, or thing. And it really limits my choices. So in relationships, so that was all about my individual challenges, identifying needs. In relational challenges, there's a whole nother layer of why it would be hard to identify our needs. One is we might feel real or perceived pressure from others to be a certain way or think a certain way or do a certain thing. And it can prevent that pressure if we identify with it. It can be really hard for us to even be aware of what we need. And we're also worried about hurting other people. If someone makes a request of me and I know I'm self-aware of my needs and I know that that's something that I can't do unless I make a sacrifice of myself, then it's really hard to say no. It's hard to say no to someone, especially if we love them very much. Um, I think another reason is, like I mentioned this before, there's not a lot of theoretical and practical education around fundamental psychological needs. So I think with the rise of popularity of Maslow's model in business and just everyday use, we are recognizing that it's really important to recognize our needs. Um, but it's not something that's taught in school or at home a lot, I think. People making space for their kids to really think, oh, what do I need in this situation? Um, and just as a side note, if I have a lot of trouble identifying my needs, it can be an indicator of codependency. Um, and I just mention that because I identify as someone who has a lot of codependent behavior. That's something that I've been working on for a few years now. Um, and at Human Systems, we define it as extreme focus outside of the self, lack of open expression of feelings, and attempts to derive a sense of purpose through specific relationships. So that means if I am engaging in codependent behavior, it means that I am trying to get my needs met by specific people, places, or things instead of starting inside of myself to see what do I need and what are all of my options for getting those needs met. Um, if you are interested in learning more about codependency, I have some books at the end for suggested reading. I think they're on there. Or maybe I just have references. But if you are interested in learning more about that, you can try the Span-Fisher codependency scale, which I have looked at tons of codependency scales. I think that's the best one, and it's available for free. And there's a few really good books that I've read on codependency. So if you're interested in those, I can certainly recommend some.
Okay.
So do you have any questions about that section, the origin of the needs wheel so far, or why it's hard to identify our needs?
No, I mean, I think I generally, I can see where you're coming from. I don't have specific questions, just some observations. I think culturally, some things are different. Maybe they're just different here, or maybe it's just my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But I hang around with engineers a lot, and my observation is that they're generally not very good at understanding or identifying needs or emotions for that matter. I think um, that's probably comes from education and personality types.
Uh-huh.
They're introverted people, their entire education history is mathematical, and they deal with machines all day long. It's quite understandable that they're challenged to understand these things. Training definitely helps, but then the environment will pull them um, back into scenarios where they can't really practice a lot of that uh, most days, anyways. So I guess everybody has different reasons on why they need a needs wheel. Mine are slightly different, but I can see where yours are coming from.
Gotcha. So, so do you mind if I comment
No,
on your, okay. So, I have found that yes, engineers tend to have a problem, but so does everybody. So when I was doing workshops on this, the reason I created the emotion wheel was because people had a hard time identifying their emotions, and these were social workers I was teaching. And the reason I created the needs wheel, same reason. I was working with social workers and nurses and psychologists, therapists, people who supposedly are supposed to be experts in this, and they all had trouble. So it's definitely not just an engineer thing. It is a human thing. Um, that's my experience. Um, so, and I think part of the problem is if the culture of an organization or a group or a family, any system, it can be any system, professional or personal, is such that need identification, emotion and need identification, there's not space for that. It's not encouraged. It doesn't feel safe. Then it's not gonna happen. Um, so those are kind of those are the two things that came up with me when I was listening to you talk about engineers
Mhm.
and the working environment.
Do you wanna like discuss these things as we go along, or do you want me to wait till the end for questions and discussions?
You know what? Might be more efficient if you just want to write down your questions
Yeah, I thought.
and then at the end we can talk because you never know, some might be answered or your perspective may shift.
Makes sense. Sure.
Okay. But I do want your questions because they're really, I love the questions. Um, okay. So, all right. So let's talk about research and theory. So the needs wheels um, draw from two prominent theories in psychological research. One is self-determination theory, and one is Maslow's theory of human motivation. And Omar, I'm sorry, can you excuse me for one moment? I think my son has a question and I work from home.
Sure.
Oh, he tells me he does not have has a question. He is just near me. Okay, so that's fine. I just want to check it. Um, okay, so self-determination theory, the definition of a need is it's an innate psychological nutriments that are essential for ongoing psychological growth, integrity, and well-being. The main premise of self-determination theory is that all humans are active and growth oriented. We are naturally inclined towards integration, towards growth and integration of our being, both mind and body, into a unified sense of self. And we are naturally inclined to integrate into a larger network and become interdependent with other human beings. That's just what we do. We grow. So in layman's terms, we are wired to grow into ourselves and to also grow into each other and become interdependent. That's just what we do. Um, according to self-determination theory, there are three categories of human need. There's competence, so we want to feel like we can do it, that we can grow, that we can achieve things, that we can do better. Autonomy is a big one. In fact, all of the research I've done on why burnout happens and why turnover happens in organizations has to do with two things: lack of autonomy, feeling like I can't make decisions, that I don't have choices in my work, and too much work. Um, So autonomy is a big one. And then relatedness is the third category of needs. So needing to feel connected with other people. All right. So the primary mechanism of self-determination theory. So this is where the mechanism is like the gateway to getting on the right path and being our authentic selves and growing purposefully the way that we want to grow is autonomous motivation versus controlled motivation. So I'm imagining, given your experience with your company and also your interest in what motivates employees, I'm sure that you have heard about, internal versus external motivation, right?
Yeah. Intrinsic and extrinsic.
Yeah, yeah. So this is that basically. So we all have autonomous motivation. I love this picture because this little girl is learning how to tie her shoes and she's clearly doing it joyfully. There's no one else around her. She's just decided to give it a shot and she's having a good time learning. Then this other picture is, this kid is just feeling put upon because his parents or some authority figures, adults, are telling him what to do, how to do it, or why he should be doing it. And it feels bad to him. So when we operate from a place of autonomous motivation, we are operating from our authentic selves. We are embodying the human systems principle. The best way forward moves us toward what we want and not away from what we fear. When we are operating from a place of controlled motivation, we are more focused on what we're trying to avoid.
Okay.
So
Okay.
just to relate, what self-determination theory says about emotions is we want successful emotional regulation, which is an open and non-judgmental stance towards one's emotions, which enables us to be curious about them and understand the meaning of them. When we can do that, when we can be really open-minded about what our emotions are, then it is much easier for us to identify what our needs are. If instead we suppress our emotions because there's lots of reasons we do that, maybe we don't feel like it's a safe space, maybe we feel like other people don't want to hear our emotions, maybe we feel like uncomfortable emotions are not okay emotions to have. There's lots of reasons for why we would suppress. It makes it a lot harder to identify what we need. When we suppress our emotions, we tend to get depressed and anxious. And we might still grow, but it won't be in a way that truly reflects our authentic self. So that's self-determination theory. There's a lot more to it. It's a gigantic theory and it has lots of sub-theories, but that is what I pulled out from it that I think is most relevant to this session. Do you have any questions about that? Or right, you're gonna just write your questions down. We're gonna talk about them later, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. All right. So the second theory that I really love is Maslow's theory of human motivation. However, the model that you're probably used to seeing, the triangle model that has like physiological needs at the bottom, and then it has love and belongingness and so on and so forth. That one I do not think adequately captures Maslow's theory. There is so much more to it. That model, which is not a terrible model. It does capture some of what he was talking about, but there's a lot of nuances to it that I think are really important. So I created this model based on my understanding of Maslow's research and just reading his scientific articles and work and things like that, that I think does a I think personally does a much better job of capturing everything and bringing in the nuances of human need fulfillment. So the primary focus of the model, if you look in the middle, is is well, actually, let me back up. Our goal in life is self-transcendence, according to Maslow. And one of the things that that triangle model is missing is the self-transcendence part, which he added on much later. So it was a business consultant who created that triangle model based on his understanding of Maslow's theory. And he did it before Maslow came up with the self-transcendence piece, which I think is really important. So it is in this model. So our goal as human beings is not just self-actualization, but we ultimately want to get to self-transcendence.
Yep.
The appearance, so our needs a lot of the times are unconscious, and we have to make room for them to become conscious. So one of the ways that that can happen is we have to fulfill our basic needs, our most pressing physical needs, so that these other higher level needs can emerge into our consciousness. So this is where that triangle model, this is the piece he was trying to capture. This business consultant was trying to show what Maslow was saying, which is we have to get all of our physiological needs met before we can have our love needs, our esteem needs, and so on and so forth. So that piece is correct. But what was not captured is that this in this model, I tried to show that our needs in all of these areas are constantly shifting. And the triangle model, I think, makes it look like once we have all our physiological needs met, we're good to go and we can move on to, say, safety and love needs. But that's not exactly the full story. So every day, the ratio of, I'm sorry, Omar, can you give me 1 second? I've got someone at the door.
No worries.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I am back. Are you there?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, wonderful. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, all right. So let's see, where was I? Um, so this is called, so what I was talking about with the triangle, that is representing what Maslow called prepotency of needs. So just meaning that if our physiological needs are not adequately met, maybe not fully met, but met enough, then we won't even notice that we have safety needs. And if we don't have our safety needs adequately met, we won't even notice that we have love needs. So my needs in all of these areas, the amount that they're met is going to be ever shifting. So for example, right now, physiologically, I feel fine, although admittedly, I opened the door and then I ran to the bathroom. So I'm okay now.
Okay.
But right prior to that, my physiological needs were not fully met. And later on, I'm going to get hungry. And I don't function as well when I'm hungry and I don't have my physiological needs met. Um, so that is always going to be shifting. And that's why I kind of made it look like it almost looks like a sea creature or something. So this represents like need fulfillment, how it's always changing. And Maslow hypothesized that most well-functioning people in society, like your average person, um, never has any one need that is fully met or unmet at any one point in time. It's like ever shifting percentages so that a well-functioning person could have, say, 85% of their physiological needs met at any one time and 2% of their self-transcendence needs met. So this is like the average pattern of need fulfillment over the average person's lifetime, let's say, or day to day, moment to moment.
What's the
Um,
red
hmm?
spirals on the so it's like you have the rings and then you have the sort of squiggly lines, the dark red and the lighter red tones. What are they representing?
So this is like how our need fulfillment shifts. So the lightest color, like on the background, it represents unmet needs. And then this this like dark red in the middle represents met needs. And then so this is a average pattern of met needs. And this squiggly bit is just kind of showing, it's kind of like
How it keeps going.
how, yeah, do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay.
Okay, good. Um, so Maslow said that the more directly an act addresses a need, the more psychologically impactful and more personally satisfying it is or fulfilling. Um, so when I can figure out what my need is, and then also, and I also know fully what my resources are, I can figure out what resources I need to use or what I need to do to get the most bang for my buck, let's say, to be the most efficient in need fulfillment. Um, and he also said that this need hierarchy may not be the same for everybody or and may not be the same in every situation or every context. It doesn't necessarily play out in a strict order. So he would say that some really driven people might value self-esteem needs more than belongingness needs, love and belonging needs. Or I might be more interested in fulfilling my self-esteem needs in a particular situation with particular people than I am in fulfilling my belongingness and love needs. So it's just always, always changing depending on what's happening inside of me and what's happening outside of me. Um, let's see. So what we do all the time is our needs can be displaced or projected. So So especially if the need that I have is unconscious and it doesn't feel safe to express it, or I never learned how to express it. So that's why if I am feeling really anxious or sad or upset, the first thing I go for is ice cream instead of thinking, wait, why am I sad? Oh, it's because I had a disagreement with somebody I love, or there's something going on with my son that is really upsetting me. In that case, my need is not ice cream or sugar. It could be something totally different. It could be peace. It could be collaboration. It could be I need understanding. It could be I feel like I don't have enough self-respect. I mean, there's all kinds of things it could be, and none of those are going to be met by me eating a pint of ice cream.
Mhm.
Um, if Another thing Maslow said is that if we're used to going without getting our needs met, it may not occur to us that our needs are going unmet, and we'll just continue to operate the way we always have and try to get our needs met with things that are not really powerful in meeting our needs, that are not the right solution for the challenge that we're having. And it kind of works. It works for a minute. So I'll eat my pint of ice cream and I'll feel amazing for about a half hour or an hour, and then I feel sad again. So,
Makes
so
sense.
that's kind of like how we may displace or project needs. Okay.
Are you
So,
are
hmm?
you flipping slides? Because I still see
Nope, I'm not. We've been hanging on this slide the whole time so we could see the model.
okay.
Um, so I am flipping my notes though, in case if that's what you've been hearing.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, okay. So in your participant notes, you should see a table called Maslow's Theory of Human Motivation, which I created to just break down everything in the model and pull out what I think are the most important pieces of his model. And something that we didn't talk about yet is at the very center of this model, we have all these unconscious needs, right? And then around that is our drive for knowledge and growth. So what we're always trying to do is we're balancing our needs with our getting our needs met with our drive for knowledge and growth. So all we're doing is we're just trying to get our needs met so we can grow. And then, so in the table, you'll see a description of all 6 of these need levels that Maslow identified. And you are probably fairly familiar with all of these. So I will just focus on the self-transcendence, which is the spiritual need. So we all want to connect with something that is bigger than ourselves. We all want to find a purpose in our life that feels really meaningful to us. And it's beyond self-actualization. So self-actualization is just meeting my full potential in the material world. So like I could be self-actualized if I am really good at playing the violin and I get to perform and share that skill with people all over the world, but I may still feel my needs are unmet because I'm not working on my spiritual self.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to skip over how I developed the needs wheels because I have a video for that.
Yep, absolutely.
And yeah, and I think you probably have some questions and I want to make room for that. Okay. So here's why having a tool like the needs wheel is so helpful. Just because the way our brains work, it's so much easier to choose from a list than to just come up with something. It really helps develop self-awareness. it helps give us more choices because we're detaching the need from a specific person, place, or thing. We have more impactful need fulfillment. So if I can identify, let's say I'm upset about something that my son is struggling with, if I can identify, be self-aware enough to know what my emotions are around that, and then what needs are being highlighted by that, then my whole world opens up. There's like so many different people that that could help me with this, and so many different things that I could do. And I eat less ice cream. um, then it helps with effective and efficient processing and creates space for more. So when I identify my emotions and my needs, it makes space for those more unconscious needs to come up. So this is a never-ending series of mountains that we're climbing. So I'll get over the first mountain of self-awareness and mindfulness around a specific situation, and then as soon as I'm like, oh, got through that, then something else will come up because that's how our minds work. Where it's just waiting for space for the next thing for us to deal with.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So that is kind of the lecture part of this mini cert before we get into the worksheet. So what questions do you have so far?
I think it's a mix of questions and comments, if you want to call them.
Yes, I would love that. All of that, please.
So one thing I so when we try and apply this here, I tried with my some of my staff. I use them as guinea pigs.
Mhm.
The one thing I noticed was obviously there are cultural differences. English is not our native language.
Mhm.
I think it is a fluent second language for most people. A lot of people will express emotions in our native language. It's called Urdu.
Mhm.
Um, and there isn't a one-to-one mapping between uh, English emotions on your wheel or English needs and
Uh-huh.
the local language equivalents of it. So I actually, we have a wellness officer on staff, and I told him to make an Excel sheet out of this and then translate each of these into whatever the equivalent in Urdu was, just to try and see
Wow.
what are we talking about.
Okay. Cool.
Um, and so one thing we realized was that uh, culturally, I mean, I don't know why that would be, but there are certain emotions that are just, we don't have a lot of that here, or we call it something else, or two of them are fused into one or something. So
Mhm.
his critique to me was that the chart is really geared towards the Western audience, and that we need
Mhm.
to is this uh, for it to be. I saw one of your videos. You were talking about how needs are universal, um, and not something culture specific. And I mean, having lived in a lot of different cultures in my life, I do see a lot of commonality. You know, people say things like people are people. You know, even if you don't know the language, sometimes. Like I lived in Sweden for 2 years, I didn't know the language, but I could see they're behaving very similarly. They become happy, they become sad. You know, there is a universality in the, especially in the language of emotions, and then obviously that derives into needs. But it does. I think the size of these boxes, if you want to call it that, the size of needs people have does vary a lot, culture to culture, even person to person. Obviously, it changes to the point that some of these are just you just don't see them.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know how they should be neutralized when assessing. So in my scenario, I uh, and this is observation number two is uh, people in my specific scenario, most of my staff are young men from an engineering background, right? So they don't know their needs very well. It is
Mm-hmm.
taboo to be talking about emotions with,
Mm-hmm.
with boys,
Mm-hmm.
girls, and all that. You don't talk about emotions. Uh, s- and so one way for us to do it is to educate everybody, mindfulness trainings, and uh, make them go through these exercises a lot so that they start developing that sense. And another is to just externally assess it. So we actually ran this with a few of my colleagues, as I mentioned, and the questions we were getting constantly were, I don't understand what this means, and some days I do feel this, and some days I do feel that, and I feel all of these a little bit type of questions, to the
Mm-hmm.
to the point that the feedback became sort of meaningless. Uh, for me as a manager, or for us as an organization, we need to walk away from these tests with at least some clear ideas on what this person's consistent longitudinal needs are, and not something temperamental, not something he's feeling just here and now, but that
Mm-hmm.
parts of the needs that define him over a long period of time, the unchanging needs that are part of his personality is what we're interested in. Because if we start reacting to, if as an organization, if we try and start reacting to every little thing they're feeling, or every little need they have on that particular day at that particular hour, obviously
Mm-hmm.
we can't frame policy or anything like
Right.
that.
Yes, that is true. Yes.
Do that. That's something he needs to probably self-regulate. We can help him do that, but the part we are interested in is how, we have senior managers who have a very high sense of control. For example, we know this. They don't.
Mm-hmm.
They're not aware of it. They behave to acquire control.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody around them knows that this guy is a very pushy, bossy fellow who likes to get involved with everything. But in the guy's mind, it's everything is that's just the way everybody is, as far as they're concerned. So
Mm-hmm.
as an organization, we look for scenarios where we can give him assignments with a lot of control and that sort of thing, right? But if his desire for control is fleeting and it's always ever changing, then in that
Mm-hmm.
case the test kind of useless, in the sense that it doesn't give us any stability to frame policy around.
Okay.
So 3 points there. Uh,
Yep.
the sort of cultural neutralization. What's your opinion on that?
Mm-hmm.
Then self-assessed versus externally assessed. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think are the? I mean, you seem to be advocating self-assessment, but have you experimented with you know expert assessment, if you want to call it that, externally?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, so maybe just start with these two questions. I can throw more at you.
These are such good questions. I am delighted that you asked these. So you are totally right. Emotion words in different languages are going to be really different. And that's because of the nature of language. Language pulls in the culture of a place, the shared experiences of a place, the history of a place. It's the collective perspective of a group of people. So it makes a lot of sense that I love that you asked someone to do a one-to-one translation. And I also love that this person came back and said, this is not working, because he's right. It doesn't work. Because languages and emotions are like a heart of where this cultural difference comes together. So you have a very clear experience of the cultural disconnect. It's really a lot around emotions. And so what I have been working on is I have a research protocol to help people, groups who are interested in it developed emotion wheels that are based on their native language.
Hmm.
Because people from all over the world buy these emotion wheels because they love the idea. But if it's someone who is a native like French speaker, they're not going to get the power of it as someone will who was born in the US.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was an amazing observation. You are good at your job, I bet. I can understand why I bet you have a very successful business. You really got to a major heart of the issue with this emotion wheel. So right now I am working with someone a professor in Hawaii uh, who is interested in creating an emotion wheel with native Hawaiian language emotion words. And so if you are interested and you want to develop a relevant um, emotion wheel for your folks whose native language is, what do you call Pakistani? Is that correct?
Urdu, yeah.
Urdu, I'm sorry, Urdu. If you want to create an Urdu emotion wheel, I have a recipe for that.
Okay.
Um, if that was the project you'd be interested in collaborating on. And what I offer people who want to do collaborative emotion wheel or needs wheel building, because I think it's the same for the needs wheel. Um, it would one thing we could do is just co-own the wheel. And so, I can offer it for sale on my website and you can use it however you would like. But that's certainly something we can talk more about if that sounds interesting to you.
Yeah, yeah, sounds good. I think it sounds like an email chain. I'll loop in some people from my end, and we can. We're doing it already, so it'll be good to collaborate with you on that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And because I have a whole protocol of exactly based on how I did it, where it's not just one person's perspective. You get, say, like 5 or 10 people to categorize emotions, and then you take information from all of those products and make it into a wheel that is really relevant to hopefully to a lot of people who speak Urdu.
I think it's not just language, by the way. I think it's also culture.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so like if you go to Sweden, um, and I guess culture is reflected in language to some extent, but if you go to a socialist country, for example, maybe one that speaks English, you'll find that phrases like collaboration and cooperation, and because the society itself is structured towards a lot more of that, they have
Mm-hmm.
a lot more variation in these words. So they will have like 10 words for collaboration, and each of them will be slightly different. If you look at Eastern cultures, like in Pakistan or India, subcontinent in general, Asia in general, I'd say, um, the family relationships are very, very strong. Uh, so, like in the English language, you have one word for uncle. Uh, and in Urdu or in Hindi, which is the Indian language, you have like 20 of them. So your paternal uncle is called something else, and your elder uncle is called something else, and your everybody has a different name uh,
Mm-hmm.
because of the depth in those relationships. Uh, and so when you ask some of these questions, then you don't get the right answers because you're just not framing that right. Anyways, I digress. What about self-assessment versus expert assessment?
Also an amazing question. So, um, I it's sort of a paradoxical answer, I think. Because ultimately, you're right. If you reacted and changed policy every time someone had an emotion, you would lose your mind and it would be complete chaos. So what I found is what I think based on the research, and my experience working with organizations, is what is best is to create an environment where people take full responsibility for their own emotions, whatever they happen to be feeling in the moment, and whatever their needs are. They are responsible for figuring out what their needs are and how to get them met. Um, the organization, the group cannot be responsible for meeting any one person's needs. What the group can do is put a structure in place where the group or organization periodically collects emotion information over time about, projects or specific processes or things like that. So one of the human systems healthy systems operating principles is the truth lies in the combined perspective of all stakeholders. So the the tool that I mentioned where it became clear that people had trouble identifying their needs, it's called Turning Emotion into Action, or T for short, is a great tool to use in a group, because if someone is having if people are, let's say, take your example with, let's say you have a manager who tends to be, his behavior can be really controlling, and the behavior is negatively affecting other people's experiences at work. So this is an ongoing issue that is affecting multiple people. So what you can do is you get all of the people who are affected by this into a room together. And the first step is you collect everybody's emotions about, it's ideally a specific event that's happened. And then you collect all of their unmet needs that are highlighted by the uncomfortable emotions, and you write them down. And what's also important is, because you were talking about how there may be trouble with translation of emotion words, and there's even trouble with translation of emotion words in people who speak the same language, because how you think of, say, the word uh, earnest might be different than how I think about it. So it's really helpful to have definitions that go with each emotion word and each need word. And then you invite a perspective shift. So this is where you bring in an operating principle that you have, or a company value that you have, and you help people see how, once they've had a space to express all their emotions and all of their needs and have them heard, this is a great perspective and empathy builder for everybody in the room. And then you ask them, well, what is a value that we have, or something that we share that could help us all shift our perspective around the situation and suggest a path forward where everybody's needs get met, knowing that ultimately it is each individual's personal responsibility for getting their needs met. For setting, say, like boundaries, if my manager is getting all up in my business and like trying to micromanage my work and stepping on my autonomy, I need to be able to say, hey, this doesn't feel good to me. And I also need to be able to say that in a way that the manager can hear it. So as an invitation and not a directive, let's say. So that's what I would say about that. And then the other thing I would say is, I'm developing well, the model is developed, but I'm developing an assessment series called Mindful Leadership, Mindful Growth. And it looks at all of these issues on an individual level, in relationships, and then on a systems level. And the assessment is designed both to help people bring more awareness to the way they behave in the environment and how they treat themselves. Well, first how they treat themselves, and then how they behave in their environment. And it also becomes kind of a recipe for address how you might address different challenges in the work environment.
That'd be good to see. But a few comments on what you said.
Yes.
Um, so people have needs, but I feel like we are more than knowing what he needs right now. We are interested in sort of I don't know how to say it, but his disposition to certain needs. So the parts of needs which define him as a person is part of his personality. I know most personality traits don't really look at needs, but what I'm saying is, for example, that there are certain people, because if somebody comes from a background where they didn't have a lot of money and they were insecure, they have a disposition towards safety needs. So if these were boxes, the safety box would be really big in his mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
He comes from a broken family, maybe relationships have a bigger box, etc. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what we're trying to understand is what are the size of boxes in a certain person so as to be able to give him the right role, inside incentivize him with the right uh,
Mm-hmm.
things. But a lot of this investigation seems to be very instantaneous. Here's what you feel now. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about parts of needs which have taken hold in his personality, which are unchanging. uh, how do we extract those? Because I can give them a safe environment, I can get them in a group, but then what they're still representing is what they feel or need right then, and next morning could be totally different. you know
Mm-hmm.
how do we
Mm-hmm.
remove this transience from this? So my wellness officer, he's doing his PhD, uh, and he came up with like a questionnaire for these needs. And he said it was like I forgot the phrase he was using, but they would ask the same question a couple of times, positively and negatively, just to make sure there's no faking going on, or there's enough variance in there to be able to score it numerically, right? And
Mm-hmm.
um, it still would come up with things. I mean, even with all these sort of testing nuances, it still came up with that person at that particular time. Yeah, it's not defining him as a person, it's just defining what
Right.
he is then and there. How do we
Right.
get to this sort of longitudinal patterns in this, without which a lot of this is very unactionable?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's so true. And you got to the heart of the issue with your question. My answer is, and might be, mm, this is going to be a different way of thinking about it. But what a person needs is not your business. It can't be. The reason is because you don't have control over anybody but yourself. All you can do is make space for someone to figure it out on their own. So the problem that I have with a lot of assessments and tools that are offered for use in the corporate world is they assume that the people in positions of formal power are responsible for the needs and emotions of people who are towards the bottom of an organizational chart. And that is codependent behavior. It's stepping on people's autonomy. So the answer is you got to let go. And your your controlling manager or managers, yeah, their emotions are going to change all the time. And the thing about an assessment is you totally got it. It's not going to give you any good information because their needs and their emotions are constantly shifting, and there's no possible way that you could ever keep up with it. That's why each person has to be fully responsible for their own needs and their own emotions. It can't be any other way.
So,
And yep, go ahead.
sorry. So my thesis here is could be wrong. People will come when they seek employment in an organization,
Hmm.
my organization. They're not saying it, but they come for fulfillment of needs,
Ah,
especially
yeah,
physiological needs, right? Most of them just want enough money to be
right.
able to fulfill some of these needs. Money will lead to some of these, but then, especially with a lot of our senior people, once they have enough money, uh, they now have higher order needs, uh, and they find that the organization is not providing that, and then
Hmm.
because the organization is not providing it, they will either leave or get very demotivated, or some people will go on a sabbatical or get into midlife crises or whatever.
Uh-huh. Yep. Yes.
they will
Totally.
they will react to these things because they don't really find the organization fulfilling a lot of these things. You're right, they should be able to figure that out on their own. We can
Hmm.
maybe help and coach them to that. A lot of people are not interested. They're just reacting to, uh, they've been brought up with the because they're spending like 8, 9, 10 hours a day at work. So
Hmm.
all the fulfillment has to come from that environment. There's supposed to
Mm.
be that dependence. They
Hmm.
seek it there. If they don't find it, their natural reaction is to leave. Uh,
Sure.
and that's a loss for the organization. So while we would love for them to get educated, they're not always willing and able, given all their other, uh, their schedule and their family environments and their
Hmm.
bravado and whatever. We don't want to rock that boat too much. We just want to make sure we understand it, especially with some of the key people that we want to keep very motivated. We want to retain. We want to go the extra mile for them. I know it kind of sounds like codependence, but it's really an effort with really special people to try and retain them through fulfillment of their needs, and of course first to understand what their needs are. Maybe
Hmm.
I don't know if that still qualifies as codependence as a negative thing. We're doing it with a lot of positive intent.
Hmm. Yeah, I have no doubt. And it would be devastating for me. It would be so hard to, so I am a business of one, and you said you have like 130 people.
Yep.
You've put a lot of effort and time and care and love into building this organization, and you put a lot of time and effort into making it a place where people want to be and creating space for people to develop their talents and contribute to the organization in a way that feels good for them. And so when after putting in all of that time and care and effort, to see someone suddenly decide this is not meeting my needs anymore, I got to get out, that's a huge loss, I would think,
Yep.
not only in practical terms, like you've invested all of this time into developing this person to be a really important contributing member to the organization, but also it hurts. It would feel like, I would imagine it would kind of feel like a smack in the face a little bit. Like we've had this relationship and you've suddenly decided, even after all of this time, when we've done all of these things together and put all of this work in, that it's not meeting your needs, so you're going to go. And they're taking with them an immense amount of industry knowledge that is specific to your organization. That is a huge loss.
Exactly.
So I can totally understand wanting to then figure out, okay, well, what we got to do is we have to figure out what this person needs exactly and what their emotions are so we can create the perfect environment for them so that they'll stay. And you can't. I mean, that's my opinion. This is so take what you like and leave the rest, right? I'm just telling you what has been my experience and my what comes from my research and a lot of work around mindfulness and things like that is you can't control other people and trying to understand what a person's needs are so then you can then meet them is a form of control and does foster a codependent environment.
Oh, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I just want to eliminate the control aspect of it. So, for example, uh, I will interview a lot of fresh grads for hiring, and I can
Hmm.
give them a number of roles. I can give them scenarios where they have a strong manager guiding them through, or I can give them research assignments where their curiosity and their inquisitiveness might work. Maybe they have a stronger need for freedom, and I should really be assigning them to a different team where there's a lot of freedom of movement. That choice I really can't make without an assessment of the person's sustained needs.
Hmm.
A form of control. I look at it as a form of facilitation, making sure the guy gets what he needs so he can grow and develop as much as possible. If I assign him in the wrong environment, he's going to get very dissatisfied anyways. And the best case scenario would be he would realize this himself and come back
Hmm.
and say, please reassign me to A, B, or C because
Mm.
I'm not really feeling happy here. And for a 21-year-old, that's a lot to ask. Uh,
Yeah, it is a lot to ask. And I wonder if right from the get-go, this is just so everything I'm offering is just an offering based on my personal experience.
mhm.
It's your business and literally your business and your responsibility. And so these are just suggestions, but this is kind of what's coming up for me. I wonder if instead of um, making the choice for them, there's a way to offer the information, all the information they need to make the choice for themselves of where they want to be in your organization and what would be the best fit for them and allowing like making space for the autonomy and them speaking up and being able to say this works for me, this doesn't work for me right away.
No, but I think my point here is even if he's making a self-assessment, how does
Uh-huh.
how does he get rid of the fact that it's not this is not a transient thing, this is a consistent pattern with me. He would have to reassess himself over a very long period of time to understand that I have a very sustained need for creativity, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, he
is that what
would.
you
And
recommend, that you would make them do this over and over again, like how often? And
well, you can't make them. You'd have to like off. See, this is what's tricky is because it's a different, it's hard. It's just, it's really hard and there's no one solution and I can't tell you like what is the best thing to do practically because you're the one in it, not me. So I can only make really general statements, but what I have found is that the greatest gift I can give anybody and the thing that's going to work out best for our relationship and the system I'm in is to create space for them to do and be and say whatever it is they want to do and be and say. And then if that's not working for me, then I then have to say whatever it is I need to say so that it becomes more like a dance and less like a formation.
More,
And I know that sounds really vague. I probably sounds pretty vague.
say that again. More like what and less like a formation?
More like a dance,
Dance. Okay. Okay.
like an organic, like moving in, moving out, changing partners sometimes, where there's a rhythm to it, but it's not necessarily something that you can predict, more organic, as opposed to like a formation where this is your spot and there's procedures to move
Mm.
from this spot to the other spot. And if you move, you got to do it in a really straight line.
Mm. I mean, speaking as a businessman, I'm not a psychologist. One criticism I've always had, especially this is a debate with me and my wellness guy. It's we always have this. Psychology treats, uh, it holds the person and his well-being first and foremost,
Hmm.
which is great, probably how it should be. But um, in the real world, for example, we have customers. They have their own personalities. They don't hire
Hmm.
us for our well-being. They're not interested in our well-being. They are
Hmm.
interested in, getting an app made or getting a task done on time, and they have their own nuances as people. And if we want to have our physiological needs met, if we want to make sure we have a salary, we have to live with a lot of that. There aren't that many choices in the world. There are situations where you have to really just understand and tolerate. And the best you can do is to know yourself well enough and to be able to assess the other guy and understand that that guy has a certain need that I need to fulfill. So if we want to deliver good quality of service, um, we need to understand, for example, if the customer has a high need for control, and then we do a lot more reporting, right? We give them a lot of
Hmm.
information and
Hmm.
everything.
Hmm.
But we need to make that assessment first. It happens unconsciously, I suppose, with experienced managers. They're so used to interacting that they get to know the other person, but there isn't a more systematic way to do it, which is where I think we're lacking. We can't have our customers fill up a needs questionnaire every morning. You know,
Right.
he's it's just not the agenda there, and so it has to be done very tactfully, very systematically. Maybe if there was a comprehensive way to do it, maybe he would sit down with us once for an hour and do that
Hmm.
for the sake of a better, deeper relationship. But
Hmm.
not very often for sure. I think if it becomes with psychology, it seems like that's the top of the agenda. But um, if we want to make sure we're getting paid, we need to keep this in a very sort of passive, efficient way. Otherwise, the people will disconnect, the customers will disconnect. Even the managers get very irritated with constant assessments at times. Uh,
Yeah, I have no doubt. Like it probably feels exhausting and you don't know if the results are going to be useful and like what's going to happen with them and it's tough and I definitely hear you because I'm coming from my purpose is human well-being and systems health
yeah, yeah.
and you have a different purpose and so you have to run everything that I say that I have to offer through your own set of needs and your own perspective and what you know to be true about yourself and your business.
Mm.
Um, so I, but I think what's great is uh, you're so aware. You're just very self-aware and you really, I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who was able to articulate these challenges in such a succinct and clear way, honestly.
Okay. How are we gonna live these problems every day?
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. And it's clear that you really care about what you've built and you also care very deeply about your employees. And that's wonderful. I mean, why else would you have scheduled a session with me other than to understand how can I do it better? How can I make a place where people are happier and feel more fulfilled? And that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately any organization's core objective is that it is
Mm-hmm.
that obviously it gets skewed by the realities of society and economics and
Yes.
all of that, but uh, that is the utopia one seeks. As close as we can get to that, whether the organization facilitates it or the people themselves figure that out on their own.
Mm-hmm.
That is something to see. Hang on, I'm just going through my questions for you.
Yep. So actually, we are a little past noon. So I was wondering if, and I know we haven't done the worksheet yet, and we definitely can still do that. And I'm wondering if it's okay if you could save your questions and we could do the worksheet in another session.
Sure. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, I can send you the worksheet if you want, or we can do it together whenever you like. Sure. I have it done.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So hang on to it. And then at our next session, I will, whatever other questions that come up for you after you kind of think about the material in our conversation today, let's definitely talk through those and we can work through your worksheet as well. So I'll give you a link for another 90-minute session
Sure.
if that works for you.
Yep, yep, sure.
Okay, great. And think about if you want to talk to your wellness officer or officers about if you're interested in possibly building and or do a motion wheel, I would be very into that. I think that
Yeah,
would be so much fun.
I will get that conversation going. They have some other interesting stuff they're doing too, so I'll connect you guys over,
Okay.
and then we can kind of see how that pans out.
Okay, that sounds great. And then in terms of uh I would love to, I think we have a lot to offer each other in terms of information and collaboration. You have a lot of knowledge about technical things that I don't have. So whatever you want to offer me as far as, pointing out broken links or problems with my website, stuff that's not working, things about that you can easily see that would make the user experience better or better ways to organize it, I would really welcome that.
Sure. I can point those out. We can, I don't know, maybe you have your own ideas on what you want on the website, or if you have an idea
Yeah.
to something, maybe we can do some of that for you. But
Oh my God. That would be so amazing. Thank you.
do you have clarity on that? Do you have ideas or plans?
So I recently did a reorganization of my website, but I think a great place to start would just be if someone objective could take a look at what I have and if they have any ideas about just how to make it better and highlight things and arrange it in a way that is easier for people to use and is, just works better, I guess. Any ideas that you have would be great.
Um, I can give you my thoughts on it. A lot of my guys are engineers, so they can tell you sort of from a visual perspective,
Uh-huh.
design and usability and all that. But then they're in terms of the subject matter, they're definitely not experts. If it's a questionnaire, what kind of questionnaire is most effective from a psychology point of view, they wouldn't know. Uh,
Oh, that's okay. I honestly would just be looking for what's the usability of this website? Like, how does it look? Is can people find what they're looking for? Does it seem to be arranged properly? Are there broken links? Are there things that are not working well that could be working better? Totally from an engineering standpoint, not from a content standpoint necessarily.
Mhm. Have you also thought of like mobile apps or whatnot? Do you know how many people use this right now? Do you have a
A lot. And I have thought about mobile apps, and I have a dream to create an app that incorporates, well, first of all, that would be just for the emotion wheel needs wheels, like the virtual emotion wheel thing that I have on my site,
right?
and the virtual needs wheel. I made those myself using just free software I found through WordPress, and it was a pain, let me tell you. So I know that apps are really expensive to build and are very labor intensive. But I would love to have an app that people could download from my website or even just use on the website that's mobile, that is like a virtual emotion wheel that has definitions and stuff, and then maybe later could be built into next steps, like here's a tool for that, or here's what you can do next, because I have a whole system. It's just um I just think that would be really wonderful, because I know what I have now is really clunky. It works, but it's not very elegant.
Yeah, yeah. And so your website is built on WordPress, I see. Okay.
Yes.
So I mean, so my wellness guy, he was telling me today that there's a lot of companies in the US that are selling sort of corporate wellness packages, and they have apps and websites and training courses that you can subscribe to. Are a lot of your customers like corporate types, or do you do what kind of customer base do you have that this website is targeting?
So it's a mix. I do most of it's not corporate so much as I tend to work more with human service organizations, like social work organizations. I am a social worker. Um, I'm not sure that. mm And then I have individuals who go through either like the mini certs that I have, or coaching certification, or I'm piloting the mindful leadership, mindful growth assessment right now. And I could send you the link if you're interested in working through that and giving me your feedback. But I'm I'm a baby business, I think of myself. I mean, I've been around for 5 years, but with the pandemic and everything, it's, there was some real downtime in growth. So I, those are questions that I'm sort of allowing the answers to emerge to, I guess.
Would you be interested in collaborating in terms of coming up with a system? My wellness guy is very keen on packaging things so that they can start approaching customers. Like we have customers in the US who we do IT for, like
Mm-hmm.
the companies that we will help them with in terms of technology, but we don't know we don't know wellness as a subject that well. I mean, we have a wellness officer, we're trying to build that up. And then so they're now thinking, why don't we build this up to a point that we go and start selling it to the same customers that we're selling um, IT to? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would be very interested in a collaboration like that. Uh, I would be interested. I would like to have more conversations about that at another time, and also share uh, experiences that I've had on that kind of collaboration project that were really positive, and ones that were not so positive. Just because
Mm.
I think I want to make sure, I know I can't make sure, but I want to, as much as possible, have a really good shared understanding of what the human systems philosophy is, and kind of, and what the language is around it, because it is not, as evidenced by the conversation we have, and you said it very well about we have to live in the real world. And the real world is not uh what I what I propose, what I have to put on the table does not always fit well with the real world. So I would be interested in a collaboration. And I also want to have a lot of conversations about what that would look like to make sure that it feels good for you all and that it meets, and so that you can decide if it really meets your needs and if it's going to be something that might meet the needs of your clients as far as like just overall philosophy. Does that make sense?
It does. Have you ever sort of taken the time to do like a one pager on that or something that summarizes your vision for your company and where you want to take that with this model and what kind of people you want to be servicing, and then that may be a good starting point. We can maybe do something similar.
Yeah, I think that would be a good starting point, actually. I mean, all the information is there on my website and in writings and projects that I've done on my own, but there is no one pager. And I think that would be actually is a very good suggestion.
I think if we start with that, and that can then build into more detail on what we need on the website and the
Hmm.
app and all that. I mean, we can test it out and get rid of the usual kinks with it, but I think in terms of substantive change, that really comes through the alignment of vision. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of hodgepodge.
Yep,
It's like,
I think you are totally right. So I love that assignment. I will work on my one pager. I think it is a really good time to do that. And I'll send you, you should be able to use the same link I sent you to schedule another session so we can finish the material from the Needs Wheel mini cert. And then if you want to start have a conversation with your wellness officers about uh, their interest in collaborating on an Urdu language needs emotion wheel, I think that would be great.
yeah, I'll get that conversation going.
Okay.
Set up another meeting, and then I think the only other action item on your end is to see if you can give us a one pager on your vision.
Yes, I
Yes,
can.
also to send me the account information for your bank account or whatever you have.
Oh yeah. So I have not I need to get that set. The person who manages my website said that there are options for that to set that up in WooCommerce, but um let me figure that out. And I will get back to you. Okay.
Yeah, not just. I mean, the website might take longer. I'm just saying if you can
Oh
send
yeah.
me your like a Bank of America or Chase or whatever bank account you have, if you can
Uh-huh.
give me like a routing number, they have a bank account number and a routing number. If you open the sort of the internet banking portal of your bank,
Oh, gotcha. So just send you like the routing number and everything, and then you can do the transfer.
exactly. So that'll be simpler.
Okay. Okay, I can do that. That would be great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Omar. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, totally. And I look forward to our next meet.
Yeah, me too. So that same link should work for setting up a meeting, but if for some reason it doesn't, just let me know and I'll send you a new one.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Say hi to your son.